Welcome and thank you for joining us. 2020 has certainly been an extraordinary year for us all, and the photographic community is no different. However, the Sony World Photography Awards is now in its 14th year, and this has been an unprecedented year for us. We have seen over 330,000 entries across 220 territories from every corner of the globe, and the professional category alone has seen a 15% increase in entries. We've been really impressed by the tenacity and the creativity that the photographic community has shown despite the challenges. And we're really pleased to be able to talk about these awards with you today. We would of course love to be doing this in person and showcasing these images with all of you as we always do. However, we really look forward to being able to do so again next year. So joining me today are a panel of experts. We have Jan Samen-Legenot, who is the Director of Product Marketing at Sony Europe, Scott Gray, the founder and CEO of the World Photography Organization, and Hannah Watson, Director of Publisher Trolley Books and Contemporary Art Gallery, TJ Bolting, who is also one of this year's Sony World Photography Awards judges. So welcome to all of you.
Hi.
Jan,
Thank you.
Perhaps if we start with you, tell us how this year has impacted Sony. What's going on in the camera world?
So first, it's absolutely great to be here again. It's a moment we are always waiting for, the Sony World Photography Awards. So in terms of industry photography, as we all know, it has been tough. It's been tough for everyone. But in terms of consumer electronics, like Sony do not only do camera, camera has been probably one of the most difficult year for Sony. Indeed, photography, as you know, it's about travel, it's about family, it's about friends, if we talk about the consumer side. And if we talk about the professional side, the biggest industry in photography, or one of the biggest, is wedding photography. That obviously didn't happen in the last 12 months. But if we talk about sport events, concerts, all these photographers doing corporate photography haven't been able to work like many people. So it was a very difficult year indeed for the photographic industry.
We've obviously seen a number of Sony launches in the past year. Is there anything that's really stood out for you that you feel has really been an empowering tool for the creative community?
We have been launching product after product, and people may think, what's happening? Why is Sony, during a pandemic, launching so many products? It's simply because products are not made in a day, and it takes a year or several years to develop a product. So it wasn't planned in advance to launch a product during a pandemic, so it was a consequence. But there has been amazing product launch during this year. We had, of course, the most recent one in terms of photography focus was the Alpha 1. That was an amazing product that was launched only 3 months ago that blends all the type of photography in one product. A product that is able to shoot at extremely high speed and extremely high resolution, bringing a new definition, I would say, to a camera on the market.
As we look toward the future of photography and the technology that enables it, what are you most excited about?
One key aspect it has been the lenses. We have been developing lenses now for years for the mirrorless format, in full frame especially. We have over 60 lenses. But one particularly really excites me. We launched the 50mm f1.2 G Master, so 1.2 aperture super bright lens with amazing capacity. Of course, image quality was launched very recently, and I think it's a very nice statement piece in terms of lens development for Sony, for the lens side. The second area, I would say, where things has changed this year is in the videography segment, because we could see this year that there has been a lot of interest developing quite naturally with the pandemic, people at home. So we have seen in the entry segment, the vlogging area, where we have been doing pretty well, actually, because we had the ZV-1 that arrived. That was the really first camera fully dedicated for vlogging and content creator. But on the other side of the spectrum, in the high-end segment, we also launched last September the cinema line, where we had two amazing models that came out, the FX6 and the FX3, that both camera were, I would say, not really awaited for, but really shook up a little bit the industry in movie making and film industry by integrating this full frame sensor that has been acclaimed from the 7S III generation as well. So all that created, I think, a really nice or good environment for Sony within this video industry.
So what are some of the unique technologies and innovations that we are bringing specifically for that audience?
So actually it's a very good question, because that's where all the logic of Sony takes place. Is we have been developing amazing technology in autofocus, and I think it's almost fair to say that it's probably the best, or at least one of the best AF that has ever been made. And if we look back at the DSLR era, AF has never been so fast and so precise with the eye tracking. What has been done by Sony is bringing this technology now in the movie industry, in the movie products, in the video recording products. And you will find the FX6, FX3 that inherit this technology of eye tracking. And what was regarded like almost a shameful action from a videographer using autofocus is now starting to become one of the most important tools for them, is to being able to rely on autofocus as photographer now naturally doing. And I think that's a very big turn in the industry overall, and this merging of technology between photography, videography, and the technology has been able to adapt to the videography industry, I think is something, a turnaround that is really interesting for the future.
Scott, perhaps if we bring you into the conversation at this point, looking at some of the trends in photography, what has really stood out to you as some of the trends you've noticed, perhaps despite the pandemic or as a result of it even?
I mean, over the past year, I mean, as Jan says, you know, it's an incredibly challenging year, and I think for all artists and photographers, that's definitely sort of, they've experienced that too. In terms of the trends, what we normally see, thanks to the judges every year through the awards, is actually the trends are more reflective of what's going on in society, you know. And I read somewhere recently that, you know, the Sony World Photography Awards is a sort of window on the state of contemporary photography now, sort of today, and I think that's very, very relevant. So we see a lot of what is important in society. So there's a lot of environmental work that comes through in the past few years. So those are the sort of trends that we see probably that are more relevant on a sort of case-by-case basis.
And as we said at the beginning, this is now the 14th year of the competition. Where do you see the competition going next?
Well, you know, hopefully from strength to strength. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's an incredible program. And, you know, normally in a normal year, we meet these photographers in face-to-face and we know what we are able to do for them and promote their work. You know, fundamentally, you know, the awards is about celebrating photography and photographers, you know, and there are so many incredible photographers out there working, and it's quite difficult for them to be spotted sometimes, and that's where we come in, where we sort of celebrate photography and really elevate them so that they can get in front of galleries and publishers, and they can get in front of the world, right, and show their work. And photography has this power to tell incredible stories beautifully well, you know, and that's what we try to sort of push from an organisation's point of view. You know, it's trying to really show that sort of beauty and power of photography, but added to the fact that consumers nowadays are so used to reading photography. So I think as a medium, it's a really accessible format. You know, people are used to reading it every day, so they can engage with it, they can really sort of embrace it, and then put that sort of in the hands of great storytellers, great artists. You end up with these incredible results. So in answer to where we want to take the awards, it's more of that. You know, it's more of pushing those boundaries, more of pushing those stories and trying to find new ways of telling that story. I mean, there's a wonderful series which the judges picked this year in the creative category by an Argentinian lady called Andrea Alcalay. And it's these beautiful sort of landscape on landscape shots, you know, two images, you know, dovetailed together. That's very different. I mean, that's a very different style, a very different feeling to what, you know, people think of like classic photography. You know, this isn't about selfies, you know, or social media. This is about this beautiful storytelling done in a contemporary way. So I'd love to see more of that, but then that's in the hands of the judges about selecting that, but really trying to sort of push those boundaries between different mediums as well.
Hannah, perhaps if we bring you into this now, what are some of the experiences that you had this year's competition? Was it very challenging to be able to judge this year's entrants?
Well, it was obviously different to how we would normally judge. We weren't all in the same room. And often that's the kind of the most enjoyable and the most challenging part, is when everyone is in the same room together having a heated debate, which makes it really, you know, a kind of valuable part of the whole process for everyone. But it was surprisingly cohesive to talk to everyone. We did have our debates, we did have our difference of opinions, but we actually all came together. We really enjoyed the experience. We were all in different time zones, which was, I mean, I felt quite lucky because I was in London, so I was kind of in the middle, but we had one judge in Korea and one in America waking up at 6 and going to bed at 3 in the morning, which was obviously, a lot of respect for that. But no, it was a really incredible coming together, and we all brought our different opinions and had lots of good debates.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really key point there, and I think not a lot of people pick up on that. You know, we work really hard to make sure that the judges cross boundaries, right? So as you say, you know, one in America, one in Africa, one in Europe, one in Korea. And the reason for that is to have those debates. You know, if we had 5 Hannahs all sitting in, you know, sort of British judges, you'd only get one kind of viewpoint. But I think the whole beauty and the reason maybe you got that narrative was because you had those different perspectives. Or
well, everyone brought something different to the conversation, and you know, we all have our kind of different backgrounds, our different perspectives of what we look for in photography, but we all came together with a really, really interesting conversation. And at the end of it, we all felt that we'd had a really good talk about photography in all its different elements and diversity, and you know, through all the entries, really kind of offering such kind of rich diversity in what we were looking at. It was really exciting to be part of.
Yeah, I think that's what really stands out from this year's competition, is that diverse breadth of creative entries that we've seen from all corners of the globe. Scott, is there anything that you can share with us in terms of perhaps countries we haven't seen entries from before that are worth highlighting?
We've seen more work from Latin America, more work from Asia, more work from Africa. You know, it's not just the traditional sort of powerhouses of Europe and the US in terms of our entries. I think we've got a much broader reach in that professional community, and some very, very strong work from places like Africa and Latin America in particular. A lot more Latin Americans on the shortlist this year than ever before.
But I had a question to Hannah, or maybe Scott, I don't know. I've seen a lot of theme covering the environment. So we have an environment category, but there was a lot of environment entries, and question was, how do you balance that between the creative aspect of the photography and the storytelling? Is there any rules, or?
There's no rules, but when you're looking at a series, you're weighing up different elements. So whether it's in the documentary section or the creative, and the storytelling is obviously a big part of it. And I think what really makes things stand out is this originality. And because there are so many entries, and year after year, and themes come up, and sometimes you can see things emerging again, but the real winners always stand out. They always have that thing that you haven't seen before. They're doing it in a different way. Maybe it's a same story or a similar theme, but it's this kind of real essence of something original, and that's what makes them stand out.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, because it feels sometimes a bit frustrating. I'm more involved on the open competition, where it's a little bit, it's one picture, one shot, one impression. That's why.
But it's a very different thing, and on the open judging, you want that impact straight away because it's one, as you say, it's one shot, one image. But on the professional work, I mean, to produce a body of work with such consistency and skill, it takes a huge amount, you know, and that needs to be really looked at. It's no coincidence that the judges every year are publishers, gallerists, picture editors, people who are used to reading photography as their day job.
The topic of photography is obviously incredibly broad and diverse. Hannah, perhaps if we look at your particular area, what are you seeing in terms of trends around diversity?
As a gallerist, I often come across artists who really want to push the boundaries of what photography is. And that's always exciting to see how it's a very nimble medium and how the technology advances help that. And especially after a difficult year for artists and photographers, there's this actually idea that feeds creativity. There's this idea of innovation is actually it's pushed by difficult circumstances. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things evolve, because I think photography has this amazing capacity to be extremely creative.
I think it's quite interesting to see how technology can serve the creativity, and you will find out that with the eye tracking, and there is a lot of portraiture and so on, of course there is less movement in the fine art photography.
I love that. I love that phrase, technology serves creativity. I think that's absolutely tremendous. I'd actually go further and say that technology which is serving creativity is enabling creators who aren't traditionally photographers to embrace photography. Yeah. You know, and it's pushing the medium, as you're saying, it's pushing that medium, pushing that creativity, pushing those boundaries, because you're not having to think about the technology. That's done for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and therefore more people can access it as a medium and start to really sort of show their creativity and show their thinking.
Let's take a look now at the open competition. This is about those individual single photographs that are relevant to each specific category. So Jan, perhaps if we start with you, what has really stood out to you from this year's entrants?
So when I look a little bit at all the entries, I think two were really standing out for me. There was the street photography. I really liked the link with the actuality with the news, and of course the pandemic, and this beautiful shot that mixing the white balance between a cold light and a warm light, creating this almost, I would say, out of nowhere visual that was almost looked like from outer space, you know, and very, very, very strong image. I think a good summary, a powerful picture. That would be one of my choices. And the other one I really liked was the lifestyle one. That was very interesting and more in contrast with the street photo. That is a picture that is telling a story about people going on the beach in a very pastel color palette, and almost remind me of some painters, like some painting of Monet, for example. He has done some paintings on the beach, and all this atmosphere I thought was very, very interesting. That would be my two preferred choices on the open competition.
Great. What about you, Scott? Anything that stood out in particular?
I think it's a staggering part of the Sony World Photography Awards, the open competition. And you know, as you said, it's this one single shot, and there is this sort of misconception that it's an amateur competition and the profession is professional. It's about a body of work, which is in the professional competition, and a single shot, which is in the open competition. And we get a lot of professional photographers entering the open competition because they haven't necessarily done a body of work that year. Hence, they sort of enter that single shot. So to win it, you know, you are basically beating 160,000 plus other single images. I think it's an incredible achievement. So picking one, I think, is immensely challenging for the judges in the open competition. For me personally, of those category winners we've just seen, I like Katarzy's, the Hungarian photographer's winner, which is the object category. I like the sort of timelessness of it. I like classic imagery. Personally, that was a standout one for me. But yes, it's so subjective, right?
So Jan, now's the time for you to please announce this year's winner.
It gives me great pleasure to announce that the winner for 2021 Open competition is Tamary Kudita from Zimbabwe, with her portrait Africa Victorian.
We're really excited to now be joined by Tamary, who will tell us a little bit more about her win. She's joining us from Zimbabwe. Tamary, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations again on your fantastic win. We'd like to know a little bit more about your photographic history, please.
Okay, my photographic journey started about 3 years ago at university. I studied a Bachelor of Fine Art at Michaelis School of Fine Art. So this degree involved disciplines such as sculpture, painting, animation, and photography. So our very first photography project was a kind of photography called Pinhole Photography, which involves the use of a pinhole handmade camera. So unlike digital photography, this involved a great deal of manual skill, and the images that were produced with this kind of equipment harmonized perfectly with the old photographic processes that I liked. So I used this as a stepping stone to branch into film photography. One of the projects that launched my African Victorian was a series entitled Maintaining Memories. So this project was dedicated to finding out the story of my origins and knowing more about the people who shaped me. So this was my second project, and looking at the way unchosen histories have shaped our contemporary state is an ongoing interest of mine.
And what made you enter the Sony World Photography Awards? How did you hear about the competition?
I came to know about the Sony World Photography Awards through the World Photography Organization platform on Instagram. My motivation for entering was to connect with the wider audience, which has a greater appreciation for African art. And I feel as though work from the African continent doesn't get the spotlight that it deserves. And representation does matter. And I'm glad I got the opportunity to put Zimbabwean art on the map.
Tamary, hi, it's Jan. I've been, first of all, very impressed by you because you are the first winner from the African continent. So it's a big deal, I think. And the second big deal is that you are very young. So how did you do it? What was your inspiration, and how this started to bubble in your head, and how did you come to do this series of pictures?
Okay, I'll start off by saying that to photograph is to frame, and to frame is to exclude. So I look at excluded narratives that you would normally not find in academic textbooks. For the narratives that we were told by our grandparents, there really was no visual record. So I would say African Victorian is a visual depiction of oral history. Furthermore, when I created the series, I wanted to pay tribute to the contemporary being who's also rooted in history. So I would say African Victorian is an environmental portrait which has been captured and frozen in time as part of a series of images that represent the African woman as a collective. And the model in my picture is an extension of myself as someone who has a dual heritage, the Shona culture that I was born into and the Western culture that I assimilated. So looking at African Victorian, you're looking at a nuanced depiction of an African woman. And I am essentially reimagining the African identity as one that is laced with hybridity.
Tamary, hi, it's Scott here from the World Photography Organization. One of the things that struck me about your work was there is a very, very strong sense of identity. How do you take that forward into your next project, and will you carry on that kind of theme?
Yes, I will continue this project. It's an ongoing project depicting women from different backgrounds and different ages. And I feel as though, as a Black photographer, the history of photography for Black women is still being written. So I needed to ask myself, what am I doing to contribute to this history? And what am I doing to represent Black women within the context of photojournalism and fine arts and the broader narrative of that? So I decided to depict African women in an empowering light. And the reason why I tend to use Victorian dresses is because I use them as metaphorical curtains which obscure Black narratives by discarding them.
Tamary, we're very excited to find out what you're working on next. Any hints you can give us what's next on the horizon for you?
I am definitely going to continue developing my African Victorian series, but I also want to revisit black and white photography. It's a project that I started in university, and I would like to revisit the Black Colonial Archive. So it's a digression from working with color to switching to black and white, which I think will complement my next series. And I always get asked the question, why don't you photograph men like in your series? So I'm going to be including male models in my upcoming series.
Fantastic. We very much look forward to seeing you and watching very closely what you bring out next. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So another really important part of the Sony World Photography Awards is the student competition. It's where we give a voice to some of our emerging talent. Scott, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about that this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is one of the most important parts of the competition. Obviously, everyone knows the professional contest, and you know that's about sort of really awarding the sort of the people who are really the masters now. You know, but it's really important from the World Photography Organisation's perspective, and I know from Sony's perspective, to really support emerging talent and that next generation. And we invite hundreds of universities to participate in the programme, universities that have a photography faculty, obviously. And they cover about 40 countries who participate. And the overall winning university gets gifted about 30,000 euros worth of camera equipment from Sony. So it's a real opportunity for the universities, but also for the students themselves within the programme. And we have 10 finalists, which we then award, and then those 10 finalists are given a brief to do a second project to enter. We have a winner from each continent and some runners-up. So I'm really pleased to announce this year's 2021 student winner as Koenraad Tolage from the Stellenbosch Academy in South Africa.
Thank you, Scott. And another important element is the youth competition. How does it differ from the student one?
The youth competition is structured for people between 14 and 19 years old. So before they've gone on to university to study their photography. And it's really aimed at trying to encourage people to really push their own photography and think about photography differently at quite a young age. Obviously, they engage with photography a lot through social media and those other elements, but we want them to capture photography differently and be quite creative in that thinking. And over the years, we have had scenarios where the youth winner has gone on to be shortlisted within the professional program later on. So to see that evolution within their own skills is really encouraging. And if we can continue to support that and encourage that growth at an early age, I think it's really promising.
Fantastic. So Scott, please tell us, who is this year's youth winner?
Yes, this year's winner, the 2021 Youth Award, is 19-year-old Pubaran Basu from India. And huge congratulations to him.
Let's now move on to the professional competition. We have 10 categories in total. Let's take a look at those winners. have a quick discussion to see what really stood out for all of you from this year's entrants. Hannah, perhaps if we start with you.
A lot of extremely high quality entries, but if I had to choose one image that kind of stood out for me, was in the landscape series. This very evocative image of these cinema seats in the middle of nowhere in Iran. And I don't know whether it's the certain kind of climate that we're in at the moment, this kind of lack of human contact, but it was very, very evocative, and it really kind of stood out for me.
What about you, Scott? Anything in particular?
For me, I thought the creative category was the strongest of all the categories for me personally, and I thought that the winner, which was the Mark Hamilton series of the taking those NASA images and then putting in these sort of the images of the barbecue and the coronavirus, and they're very, very, very topical, very interesting, but also touches on what we were saying earlier about that diversity of where photography is right now.
How about you, Jan? Anything that stood out for you?
Particularly like the wildlife category with the low cost, because for me this is the perfect blend in photography between the technicality of photography, the beauty of a shot, of a picture, but in the same time a terrible storytelling about this insect eating up all the East African continent life. And I thought the pictures were amazingly impressive. I think about two pictures particularly. You see this truck in the middle of the swarm of this low cost, and if you zoom into the picture, you can see the expression of this person taken into this swarm, and another picture where you can see all the insect coming in onto one single farmer that is probably fighting for his crops. I thought that category was really amazing.
Well, the judges clearly had their work cut out for them. But Scott, over to you now to please announce this year's winner.
Well, I am utterly delighted to announce the winner of the 2021 Sony World Photography Awards Photographer of the Year is the wonderful Scottish documentarian Craig Easton for his series Bank Top.
So now we're delighted to be joined by Craig Easton to talk through some of his work for this year's competition. Craig, welcome. First of all, congratulations on your win. Hopefully you're as thrilled as we are.
I am. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled and a little bit shocked, I have to say.
Craig, tell us a little bit about your inspiration to submit an entry into this year's competition.
Oh, the Sony Awards is something that in the photography community we're all aware of, and it attracts entries from all over the world. So it's almost a kind of annual celebration of photography. So I often enter. I've entered in the past, and this year in particular, the work I'd been doing, it was a very difficult year for a lot of people in the pandemic. But I was lucky that I was halfway through a project when the pandemic struck, and I had an opportunity to finish it last summer. So it was all ready to go, and I was pleased that it coincided with the Sony Awards.
Hi Craig, can you tell us a little bit about how the project came about, where it is, who they are, because there's something so unique that comes across about the people, the community that you're trying to portray.
It was born out of a wider interest of mine in representing northern communities and sort of challenging stereotypes really, and really trying to tell stories from often misrepresented or marginalised communities. And I've been working in and around the region for a long time with 16 and Thatcher's Children and projects like that. And then Sophie Skellen at Blackburn Museum was running an initiative called Kick Down the Barriers and invited me to be part of that, which was really in response to two BBC Panorama programmes in which Blackburn was kind of questioned or labelled as the most segregated town in Britain. And so we wanted to sort of challenge that and think that this sort of simplistic generalisation didn't represent the Blackburn that we knew. And so in an effort to understand the divisions that this kind of language can create, we wanted to sort of examine the use of that word segregation and challenge this narrative of divided communities.
And can you tell me a little bit about the process of actually taking the portraits and how it kind of ties in to what you're trying to explore about people? How do you take these images?
Well, I work on a big old plate camera, so it's a 10x8, a wooden 10x8 field camera. So it's not, I'm not invisible in any way in this process. I'm there in the street with this great big wooden camera on a tripod, and I think that's an important part of the process. Really, I feel like this isn't reportage in any way. It's very much a sort of collaborative thing where I'm speaking to people, and it takes 20 minutes to set up the camera and focus it, and we decide where we're going to make the photograph. And so it feels like in many ways they're gifts to me from the people that I'm photographing, that they're presenting themselves to the camera, and I hope therefore feel some kind of agency over the way that they're presented, because I am an outsider to some extent. I mean, I live locally, I live in the northwest of England, but I still feel like it's something that we want to do together to make a photograph that represents them.
And how do you meet everyone that you photograph? Does one person lead to the other, or?
Yeah, I hang around. Yeah, I am, like I say, I'm very visible. I hang around in the streets in all different ways. Sometimes I'd just be chatting to some lads on the street corner. Sometimes I'd be pally with the shopkeeper who would say, "Oh, you must go and see so and so," and then occasionally I'd be invited into people's houses. And I'm a big advocate of actually meeting people in their own environment. I'm not going through any kind of agency to say, "Can you introduce me to people in this area?" I'm just spending time there, and it really is a function of how long you spend there and how interested you are in people. And if you're genuinely interested in people's stories, people want to tell you their stories.
Mm. And what do you see for the work? I mean, I'm a publisher and a gallerist, so it seems you've done an exhibition, but you've done a book, or what's the kind of plan?
Yeah, it was shown in Blackburn, and that was always the plan, to show it in Blackburn. But for me, that's never the end goal, because the purpose of this is why it's fantastic to been given this award through Sony, is that to get it to a global audience, to get the stories out from northern communities beyond the communities which they're made in. It's important that I show it there, but then I really want to be able to take it, and we will hopefully exhibit it further afield.
Well, congratulations. I think it's an absolutely stunning set of work, and I hope to get to see it in the flesh one day soon.
Well, that would be great, wouldn't it? We certainly hope to be able to take it outside Blackburn. It's important that the community sees it, but then I think it's important that other people see it too, hopefully.
Yeah, well, absolutely. From our side, from the World Photography Organisation, we are delighted that you're this year's winner. Huge congratulations, and we will certainly do our part where possible to make sure as many people see that as possible.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody, for your support and your kind comments.
Craig, thank you so much for joining us today and sparing the time to talk about your work. And yes, final congratulations from all of us. And we look forward to seeing the work you do in future as well.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you to my panel as well for joining us today to talk through this year's awards. Thank you for joining, and we hope to see you in person very soon.